Hi, I'm Tom Stephenson and welcome to Microsoft Project Made Easy. In the last few videos, I've kind of gotten into a little bit more complex things, and I thought today we'd go back to some of the basics. So if you're just starting out with Microsoft Project and you're wanting to understand a little bit about activity relationships, I'm going to go through the different types of activity relationships there are and how they interact with each other and how you can set them up and things to watch out for. Alright, so let's get started, but if you're new to the channel, click subscribe. You can check my playlist. I have a lot of videos that start right from the beginning and move up through more advanced levels of Microsoft Project. And also click the notifications. I'm a professor of construction management and I do everything about construction. So you can check on some of the other playlists too if that's of interest. All right, so I would suggest you type in maybe 5 activities and put in durations similar to this. Don't worry about your dates, but we're going to be different than mine. And make sure that things are in auto schedule. So if you're seeing something like a thumbtack, make sure that you've changed that to auto schedule. By the way, you can always have new activities that you enter auto schedule by going down to this bottom left corner here and clicking auto schedule. And now any new tasks you put in will always be that way. So you don't have to play around with, highlighting them and under the task tab, switching them to auto schedule or individually doing it. Okay, so I put 3, 4, 5, 6 days just to make it a little bit different. And most of you are familiar with predecessors, right? So as a predecessor, we want to say what has to happen before something else. And everything is numeric in Microsoft Project. So these are the rows and they're numbered. And so if I put number 1, it's going to put a finish to start relationship between activities. I can quickly add that and advance that by just highlighting a whole series of activities. And under the task tab here, I can click on task and then I can click on the link icon. So you see that link icon there, and that will highlight those and it will essentially link them together all in a finish to start relationship. So finish to start just simply means this activity has to finish before this activity can start. Now we can do some things that we can adjust with the activities. What we call lag time, and in Microsoft Project, negative lag time, in project management terms, lead time. And so all we have to do, there's a shortcut here. We can just click right on the line, the connector line, double click, and that brings up this task dependency box. Microsoft Project allows you to do things a multitude of different ways. I find if it's a simple connection, like one activity to another single activity, this is a pretty good shortcut. The other way that we can change different relationships and that we can put in lead and lag times is we can double click on an activity and that brings the task information box. And if we click on the predecessor tab here, then again, you can change relationships here. This is very handy if you've got 3 or 4 activities going into one activity. I'll show you that in a minute. All right, so if I want to put a lag time on something, as I said, I can just sort of go to that line, double click, and I can say, all right, give me a 2-day lag. If I click OK, watch what happens. That advances that 2 days. So it's allowing me to wait. It's allowing a wait period. In construction, maybe you want to have the grout dry before, or the tile dry before you grout it. Or maybe you want the concrete to cure before you actually start stripping the forms. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why you might do that. I do advise my clients, it's probably better if you're doing something like that, concrete curing, it's probably actually better to insert another activity and call it concrete curing. That way everybody knows what it is, right? So that can be helpful from that perspective. Okay, so that's giving you plus 2 day. What does it look like if I do minus 2 days? And we go here. So I'm gone minus 2 days. So it's gone back 1 and 2 days, right? So that's what we'd call a lead time. So that is pulling this activity back behind this activity. We have a finish to start relationship and it's saying minus 2 days. By the way, it's saying minus 2 working days, which is counting, not counting Sunday and Saturday. So that's what's going on there, right? Because it would have been right at the end of Monday going into Tuesday. And so it's pulling it back on the Monday and pulling it back to the beginning of the Friday, just as Thursday completes. So it's these little nuanced things you have to get a little bit used to how it works, because Microsoft Project will typically do things in working days unless you do something a little bit different with it. And I'll show you that as well. So I'm going to double click on this. I'm going to bring this back to 0. So I'll bring that back to 0. Now we're normalized here. So yeah, if I wanted to say something that, like this activity here, task number 4, if I wanted to, it's 6 days. If I wanted to make it count calendar days, I could just go 6 ED, right? And that's elapsed days, right? And so when I do 6 elapsed days, you see it started on the Saturday and the Sunday, and now it finishes on the Thursday. So it's counting Saturday and Sunday. That might be good for something like concrete curing. If I did that activity, in concrete, typically, you know, we might leave it 7 days, right? That would allow it to go right through the Saturday and Sunday. It's not like concrete, you know, Friday night comes and says, oh, I'm not going to cure anymore. No, it keeps curing. So you want it to count wherever it hits a window, weekend in those cases. So I'm just going to move that back, and I'm going to change this. I'll move that up to 6 days, and I think I'll get rid of the E now. So now I've showed you how that works. So you just have to put an E in front of the D. So you just go 6 ED, 7 ED. You know, if I put task 3, 4 here, and I go 5 ED, it'll put elapsed days, right? So just showing you that again. Okay, so the next one is different types of relationships. So let's try a start to start relationship. So finish to start. Let's put start to start. So this is going to be starting. Watch what happens here. It's going to be starting once activity 2 starts. So what that really means is activity 3 cannot start unless activity 2 starts, right? So if it's very related to the start of activity, it's not necessarily related to the finish of this activity, although task 2 is, but it is very related to this activity starting. So if I go start to start, right? And I could also, with that, I should also say I could put a lag on that if I wanted to. I could say I want it to start 1 day after activity 2 starts. So I can have that relationship going there. And by the way, I showed you negative lags. A lot of construction contracts, they don't like negative lags. I could have accomplished the same thing by doing a start to start and a positive lag, right? So if this had like a negative 3-day lag, it would have it coming from the finish of this back 3 days. But if I put it with a plus 1 day, it puts it at the same spot. And a lot of construction contracts, like in civil projects, heavy industrial, they want to see it from a start to start. They don't like to see it from a finish to start because they feel that the start of something is more relational than the finish. All right, so that's giving you that. But if we do that, we should make sure we connect this up with something that is logical. So the finish of this has to connect up with something else that's logical for us, because we don't like to have open ends, as I've said numerous times before in my other videos. So, you know, keeping in concert with that, let's say I want to have here activity 2. So I'd put comma 2. So I got 3 and comma 2. So there, I've got it closed off now, which is good because that means that that would push this forward. You know, at a certain point, this will push that other activity forward because I placed the link there. If I didn't put the link there, if I undo this a couple of times, I should see that without the link, right? If I didn't put that link there, if I make this activity take longer, it doesn't really do anything. Like it just pushes. I want it to push out what makes sense on my project. So I've got to remember to make those connections in there to make sure that that actually works and that it adjusts things. That's the whole point of developing these types of schedules, is that we can see when something gets delayed and has to move, what is it impacting, so we can make adjustments and iterations. Nothing about scheduling says that it's going to work from your plan exactly. But you want to see when it doesn't, you want to see the impacts, and then you want to adjust it, right? You try to make it work, but things, we live in a VUCA world: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, and we have to deal with those things. All right, so let's start. Let's try a finish to finish relationship. Maybe I'll put another one here just to lengthen it out a little bit. Task 6, we'll put maybe 8 days on this one. And let's put that this has a finish to finish relationship with task 4. All right, so I'm going to put finish to finish relationship with task 4. So I'm going to double click on, I'm actually going to put number 4 in here. All right, and then I'm going to say, I could try and click this right here, double click, and then that's saying 4 to 6, which is good. The other way I could have done that, as I said, I could double click here, and I could go, you might not open to the predecessors, it might open to something else, but you got to go to predecessors. And I'm going to say finish to finish, right? I'm going to say finish to finish. I'm going to click OK with task 4. So that's with this one here. So what that means is task 4 has to finish in order for task 6 to be able to finish. Task 6 cannot finish unless task 4 has finished. Now, I don't like that this is just starting out in midair. So this could start maybe with this activity here, which is task number 3. Okay, so this could start with task number 3. So I'm going to just click over here. Comma, 4 F comma 3. And you see when I did that, and sometimes you see those little boxes that stay up. It's just the video card that needs to regenerate. Once I enter another activity, it goes normal. Sometimes that'll happen on your screen too, so don't worry about that too much. Just do something else and you'll see it'll regenerate itself. All right, so we've got here with the finish of this activity. Now it's basically we can start this activity. So we've said activity 3 needs to finish before we start activity 6. And activity 6 cannot finish unless activity 4 has finished, right? So it's relational to that activity, right? It needs that to happen. Now, if I shorten this, let's see what happens. That's where it becomes interesting, right? If I shorten that a little bit, there it is. That's fine because they're finishing at the same time. So that's finishing. That's it. Let's see what happens here. So you see how that moved, right? Watch this. I shoot it another time. That's moving, right? That is shortening that based on, like, that is the one that's moving to start, because this has to finish in order for this to finish. So this cannot move that. Like, it's not just going to move it longer. It's basically, as I'm shortening this, it's shortening it from the left side, right? So you can see how that's actually working with that. That's understanding how these relationships work and play out. It's very, very helpful for you to try the different things and see how they work. Now, I'm just showing you the different relationships here. Honestly, if you can just have finish to start as frequently as possible, if it makes sense. You don't need to use a lot of different relationships to make it fancy, right? Only do it where you need to make the schedule behave a certain way, and that the limitations on your activities dictate that. Because I see a lot of students and clients, they get all fancy with all these different relationships, and then it's behaving funny and they don't understand why it's behaving funny. Well, you kind of got to know how the relationships behave when things change, when you update things, and how does that play out on the overall schedule. Finish to start is pretty straightforward to follow. Some of these other relationships, it takes a little bit of review. So there is that aspect of keep it simple, right? The KISS principle. And I'm a firm believer in that. But I did want to show you the different relationships in this because they are useful. Like, there's certain times where finish to start just doesn't cut it. And that's when you want to use the other relationships. Now, the one I'm not telling you about is the start to finish. This is rarely used in project management. Like I've never really used it. You might you might get a scheduler in here and they'll say, oh, I use it for this, but really it really behaves kind of funny. So I recommend you don't use it, and that's why I'm not going to get into showing that particular one. The other thing I did want to show you too is if you want to break an activity, so you want to have it break up for a period of time. So you can also do that. Like you could have this activity here, and you could say, if you're in the task tab, you could go to the break symbol and you could click on where you want to break it. So if I click on this, see how it's got split task and it's got this funny looking bar. And then as I slide along, you see how the day changes? Well, that's telling me which day it's going to break it at. So it's going to, right now it's going to break it at Thursday, and I'm going to move it over to the end of Monday or Tuesday, right? And you see what it does? It gives you a break or a time period. You could do this if you had a single activity that you were going to start and leave for a few days and come back to. That's a possibility. It's very helpful when you get into the updating process and somebody shows up and they were supposed to stay there and then they disappear for 2 days and they come back, or 3 days in this case, and then they come back just to be able to effectively display what happened, right? So that's always helpful. Now, if you've done that and you want to change it, you can always pull it back. I only wanted 2 days. Or I only wanted 1 day, right? You can always do that. So that's kind of the nice thing about that. You can pull it left to right once you put the break in there. If you want to get rid of it totally, just pull it back and then it's back in there. So that's a very helpful aspect of relationships and splits and delays that you can do with that. And a lot of people don't realize they have that little advantage there. So we've shown you the aspect of finish to start relationships, the most common relationship that you'll see out there, and that's the default relationship. That's why it doesn't say FS, because everything is finish to start. Start to start, activity 2 here has to start, or activity 3 will not be able to start, right? So that's important there. And finish to finish. So we've got basically, in this case, activity 4 has to finish, or I won't be able to finish activity 6. And we should make sure that there's no open ends, that our connections are completed so that we have a complete network here. Now, the one relationship that I also didn't show you is concurrent relationships, right? So maybe what I'll do is I'll get rid of some of these here. I'll just get rid of some of these now. So if I wanted to have just concurrent relationships, then probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go 1, 1, and then I'm going to close it off, and I'm going to say with task 5, 2, 3, 4, and that'll close that off. And then I'll say over here maybe 6, I'll say 5. I'll say 5, and that'll close that off. And so now you've got that continuous sort of loop. You've got concurrent activities happening here. They're all dependent on the finish of task 1. Task 1 is extended out. It pushes everything out from that task that's connected to it. If we want to see the critical path through that, and remember the critical path is the longest path in the network because it's not showing it right now. We can easily do that by going to the Format tab, Critical Tasks, and we can see that, we got 2 critical paths there, which is fine, but you can easily have that. If I change one of the durations here, then you'll see there's 1 critical path. Or if I change that back to 6, we got 2, and maybe I'll make that one just so it displays a little bit differently. And so you've got critical path is the longest path, which is here through the network, and that's why we want to complete all of our activities here, right? If we don't have all of our connections in place, then that's not going to necessarily give us true information. So for example, if I take out the number 3 here, and I go here, you see that? It's showing this is the critical path, but what's this? This is really needs to connect down here, if that's what makes sense. Then that's what should happen. But it should connect to somewhere, right? So to complete the network so that we know that it's calculating the correct critical path. So I'll just 2, 3, 4, there we go. And there's, of course, when you're doing all of this, there is the network diagram. Don't forget, you can slide to the left, right click, network diagram. And in the network diagram, that's showing you the relationship and the schedule logic between the activities. So that's always good to also review. But I cover that in other videos. And so if this is, hopefully this is giving you just a good idea of the relationships and how they work together. One more thing. You can insert the successor column. So you can insert column, type S for successor. So all I did was I right clicked, and I'll just do that again. So you click on the column, right click your mouse, insert column, click S for successor, click on the successors tab there, and it inserts the successor column. So this is telling you which activities are successors. So you see number 1, it tells you 2, 3, and 4 are come after it. That's the successor. Whereas number 5 is saying that 2, 3, and 4 are the predecessors. So that's very helpful too. If you're worried that you left an open end or something, there should be no predecessor to the first activity and no successor to the last, but everything else should have something in it at least. All right, so that's what I really wanted to get across today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to learn a lot more about Microsoft Project, click subscribe, check my playlist. I really start from the beginning and work ourselves along, and you'll get a good perspective. So I'm Tom Stephenson, wishing you a wonderful day, and if you enjoyed it, please leave a comment. See you next time. Bye for now.